Hello all, welcome to yet another session of our Ammonia Project Features webinar series. And this time, we will focus on renewable ammonia projects in Sub-Saharan Africa. And as always, feel free to put any questions you may have into the chat. This session is being recorded, and the recording of this session will be online in a few days on our YouTube channel. And next to that, there will be an article written on the ammoniaenergy.org website. And we have three speakers today, so talking about projects in Sub-Saharan Africa. So Ralf Koekkoek from Maire Development, Marcel Jacobs from Jacob Lawren representing the African Hydrogen Partnership. And lastly, we have Alan Manhanga from Sable Chemicals. Next slide, please, Julia. So there has been an academic study last year which basically calculated what would be the levelized cost of ammonia in 2030, but also 2040, 2050, based on renewable power. And what you can see here is that Africa is a very interesting place to produce renewable ammonia. Basically, the redder or the more orange the location gets, the lower the cost for renewable ammonia production. And because Africa is such an interesting location, we have a series of 3 webinars. So next slide, please, Julian. So last month, so in October, we focused on the northwest of Africa, where we looked at projects in, for instance, Mauritania and Morocco, and what are the current circumstances over there. This month, we will focus on Sub-Saharan Africa, and in particular on Kenya and Zimbabwe. And next month, we will focus on projects in Egypt. Next slide, please, Julian. So already I mentioned to next month, we will be having the project opportunities in Egypt. You can sign up to that as well. And with that, I would actually like to introduce our first speaker of today. So that's Ralf Koekkoek from Maire Development. So Ralf, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks, Kevin. So my name is Ralf Koekkoek, Project Development Manager in Maire Development. We are the project development company of the Maire Tecnimont Group. And we have been working already for quite some years on several power to ammonia and power to fertilizer projects, among others in Sub-Saharan Africa. So Julian, if you can show the presentation, or is it on? Ah, there it is. So today I would like to tell more about our activities in Sub-Saharan and specifically in Kenya. If we look at sustainable fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer production, then we're looking at the following scheme. So we're looking to produce hydrogen from renewable energy, combine that with nitrogen in the air to produce ammonia, and from the ammonia go downstream into fertilizer through the production of nitric acid, ammonium nitrate to produce calcium ammonium nitrate or ammonium nitrate as a nitrogen fertilizer, or alternatively NPKs by mixing in DAP or MOP. So that is the general scheme we are mainly looking at for the production of sustainable nitrogen. Of course, there would also be an opportunity to go to urea in case there would be a green CO2 on the site. Next slide. If we look at our technologies, then we're part of the Maire Tecnimont Group. Our sister company, Stemi Carbon, has developed a unique green ammonia process that we are using in these power to fertilizer projects, and that have several key advantages. One of them is the designed layout for a low capex expenditure. We see that especially if you go to a smaller scale, then economies of scale can have a huge effect on your business case. With this design, we have an optimal capex and therefore helping the business case. There are not so many references of green ammonia plants worldwide in that size, but we have 4 operating plants in this size, so that's quite unique. And there's also a possibility to make modules from the plant and therefore have easy construction on site. and has a very high reliability, which is especially important in remote markets. But also because we see that several companies are interested to start fertilizer that did not have that experience before, or ammonia, for instance, electricity companies going downstream. We can also have training simulators available to train operators well upfront and provide digital solutions to help operate the plant in the best conditions. And that's part of the technology. Then if we go to our project in Kenya, specifically, there we are looking to produce 200,000 tons of nitrogen-based fertilizer, mainly calcium ammonium nitrate and NPK 2655, which is used by the Tea Association. The production will be based on renewable electricity and water as the raw materials. And in the process scheme, as I showed, from those two raw materials, you can go down to the nitrogen-based fertilizer. Kenya has a unique advantage in that perspective because it has a huge renewable energy power with solar, wind, and geothermal. And therefore is ideally suited for such a power to fertilizer concept. What is important and what we have seen in the last years for the development of such a project is that is to involve the whole value chain. So what we have done over the last 2 years is we have built up a strong consortium with equity partners like IPS, one of the biggest industrial conglomerates in East Africa, but also with off-takers, with a hydrogen company from Norway to build a full consortium that can take care of the investment, the equity investment, but also of the off-take and further distribution of the fertilizer downstream in the market. And that really has proven to be a success to move the project and develop further. Next slide. If we look at, and when we started the project, we were really focused on bringing sustainable fertilizer production and going from fossil-based fertilizer production to green fertilizer production. What we have seen over the last years, and especially in the period of COVID, but now also with the conflict in Ukraine, is that fertilizer prices have increased so much over the last years that for Sub-Saharan Africa, it's not so much about having a green fertilizer project, it's about food security. It's about food security, making sure that your farmers have access to affordable fertilizer to replace imports of fertilizer with local production in a sustainable process, and maybe even create an export potential to export the fertilizer to neighboring countries. But food security is really crucial. For the location, we have chosen an inland location because this is a local production plant producing for the local market. So we have chosen the site of Assyrian Industrial Park, which is located next to the geothermal power resources in Kenya, and ideally located for distribution further into the country. And that is really important for such a project, for every project to look at the specific dynamics of that project and the ideal site and configuration for such a country. Then maybe to end also with the slide that Kevin was showing, if we look at the potential of Africa for green ammonia production, partly for export, next slide, Julian, or for local fertilizer, then we believe the continent holds a true promise to use its natural resources to start industrial production of ammonia and ammonia derivatives. And as Met Development, we're more than happy to support partners, local partners, in the development of their projects. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ralph. That was quick, but also very nice to see the overview of the project that you're developing in Kenya. So with that, I would like to give the word to Marcel Jacobs. Marcel, you're on mute.
Kevin, wasn't Ellen supposed to be first?
Here you go. There you go.
Okay, so anyway, let's get started. So as Alan will explain in his next in his presentation, Sable Chemical had been successfully producing green ammonia in Zimbabwe from 1972 to 2015. This was mainly due to, but he will explain it better than I do, a very affordable renewable energy. So that actually proved that in the rest of Africa, it is possible to have a green ammonia plant, provided you can get renewable energy for an affordable price. Today, green ammonia locally produced can compete against gray ammonia imported. However, it cannot today compete against gray ammonia locally produced, and that is where I want to talk a bit more. There is, and this is the slide indeed, there is a significant financial risk involved in investing in long-term old technology projects. If you look at this slide, this is basically the market share from fossil fuels against green hydrogen. So today, fossil fuels is about 100% of the market share, but in 40 years from now, it will be almost nil. So that means that over the next 40 years, you will see a decline of market share from fossil fuels, resulting in less liquidity, projects becoming less liquidity, increased capital cost, and projects becoming less profitable, potentially resulting in partial or full default, and in the worst case, risk of stranded assets. On the other hand, if you look at green hydrogen, over the next 40 years, market share will grow. Liquidity will increase, capital cost will decrease, and profitability will increase. So over the project life cycle of the ammonia plant, let's say 30 to 40 years, the financial risk of default for a gray ammonia plant is significant. In our view, AHP's view, it makes sense to invest today in a green ammonia plant based on low renewable energy cost. Next slide, please, Julian. So this talks a bit about East Africa. I mean, Ralph already gave us a good overview of the potential of Africa, but then Africa is a big continent. So if you then look where the biggest opportunities are, right now it's actually on the eastern side of Africa. To have a viable plant, a viable green ammonia plant, in our view, you need three elements. You need low-cost renewable energy, and then we're talking about something like $30 to $35 per megawatt hour. You need cost of capital in the European bracket, 5 to 6%, and then you need local demand at close proximity. So if you look at East Africa, they have a potential for low-cost renewable energy with, as Ralph already said, geothermal, with solar, with wind. We can combine several countries in a corridor that reduces the financial risks for a single country, and there's a large unfertilized agricultural potential. Right now, Africa per hectare fertilizes 20% of the global average. So there's potentially a very big market close by. And as I said before, today, green ammonia can compete with imported gray ammonia because of the transport component. So East Africa has all the elements for a viable green hydrogen ammonia business, hence the corridor. So the purpose of the corridor is to have several neighboring countries interconnect in a hydrogen ecosystem for baseload renewable energy, green fertilizer plant, grid independent power, maritime fuel, mining, and land transport. Now, for the sake of time, I'll move on and talk a little bit about the African Hydrogen Partnership, which we invite everybody to join. The African Hydrogen Partnership, for which we are a pioneer member, is the only continent-wide African umbrella association dedicated to the development of green and natural hydrogen. Yeah, it covers the whole of Africa, all African nations. It promotes fair business and strives to achieve the climate targets of Paris Agreement and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Membership is open for corporations and institutions. For more information, interested party, we invite you to contact Siggy Hugerman, which is on the next slide. So that's it for me. Hopefully not too long. And after Alan's session, we're open for questions.
Thank you so much, Marcel. And it's very nice that you've given more the broader overview as well. Also connecting the dots between Zimbabwe more towards the south and Kenya really on the east side of Africa. And with that, actually, I want to give the word to Alan, who will also provide us with some insights of a renewable ammonia plant that has actually been operational. Alan, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Kevin, and thanks to the previous speakers, Ralph and Marcel, for opening the floor. My presentation is going to be based on two things. I'm going to focus on the legacy, what we have done for 43 years, making green ammonia at Sable, as well as our future plans, what we are actually intending to do going forward. What you are seeing there is the picture is the Sable factory as it stands right now. Next slide, please. So Sable is located in Africa. It's in the it's in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is in Africa, but in Zimbabwe it's right there on the red dot, central Zimbabwe. That's where we are located. Next slide, please. So Sable, at a glance, we are the sole manufacturer of ammonium nitrate in Zimbabwe, which is a nitrogenous fertilizer. We started operations in 1969 based on 100% imported ammonia, which was gray ammonia, obviously. And in 1972, we added the ammonia making section, which was premised on electrolysis, because there was now a Kariba dam, which was producing a lot of hydroelectricity power, which was not being used, all of it. And as a result, there was excess power at cheap price, and it made sense that we started the ammonia making section based on electrolysis. So the full capacity of the plant is 240,000 tons of ammonium nitrate per annum. And we used to employ 480 people. Right now, after the decommissioning of the other section, we are down to 300 people. What you are seeing in the picture there are the electrolyzers of the former electrolysis plant. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a typical electrolysis process where you've got water coming in through a deionizer to purify the water. You've got AC current coming through a converter to DC, and then into the electrolyzer modules. And then out, you get your hydrogen in an hydrogen separator, as well as oxygen. In our process, the hydrogen is what we were looking for to take through the Haber process. The oxygen we were selling to a ferro manufacturer, which is nearby. Next slide, please. So this is the Sable green ammonia process flow between 1972 and 2015. I will explain later on why we decommissioned this plant. What you see on the left, which is in red, is the electrolysis plant producing the hydrogen into the ammonia synthesis plant. Also the air separation unit producing nitrogen, and again going into the ammonia synthesis plant. And then from there, it goes into storage. From storage, you take some of the ammonia into the nitric acid plant to make the acid, and then the acid plus some of the ammonia, they meet in the ammonia nitrate plant, and then you get your ammonium nitrate. And like I said earlier on, 240,000 tons per annum is our design capacity. Next slide, please. So what were the challenges with the model in 2015? What happened is the cost of power went up significantly. When we started the plant back in 1972, the tariff was less than 2 cents. And for a long time, we were on a 3 cents tariff, which is the $30 per megawatt. But the tariff started going up, and in 2015, it was 5.6 cents per kilowatt hour. Right now, we are sitting at about 9 cents. and the projections are next year it will be around 11 cents per kilowatt hour. So because of the increase in tariff, it was not profitable to continue running the electrolysis plant. Also, availability of power. Like I said earlier on, the plant was commissioned upon the completion of Kariba Dam in 1962, and there was lots of power. The country was not as industrialized as it is right now. The population was too small, so usage of power was limited, and there was lots of power. But in 2015, there was a shortage of power both in the country and regionally. And one of the reasons was in Kariba, there'd been low levels because of sustained droughts, which led to low volumes of water in the dam, which also led to decreased generation capacity. The technology is also energy intensive, so you need lots of energy to be able to run this. And when you have shortage of power, then you can't run it. Next slide, please. This is a production fact sheet. It shows our production profile of ammonium nitrate from 1969 up to 2019. As you can see, between 1969 and 1972, it was purely based on imported ammonia, which is shown in blue bars. So you import the ammonia and then you convert into ammonium nitrate. And then from 1972, you can see that the imported ammonia, which is in blue, was falling down, excuse me, and most of the ammonia that we converted locally was locally produced ammonia from the electrolysis plant. And it shows that it can run sustainably as long as you've got enough energy, and as long as the tariff is sustainable, then it can be done. But you find that in the later years, it became a challenge to produce locally because the energy was becoming a problem and there was lots of load shedding. And because of that, we could not make as much ammonia as we wanted, leading on to the challenges that led to the decommissioning of the section in 2015. Next slide, please. So what is Sable doing right now? Right now, the model that we are operating is called 100% or total importation. 100% importation, ammonia goes into storage. Some of the ammonia goes into the nitric acid, and then some goes to the AN, and then the nitric acid and the ammonia meet, and then you make your ammonium nitrate fertilizer. Next slide, please. These are the types of ammonia that can be made by source. So fossil fuel based, whether you are steam reforming, and then you can make your gray ammonia, or you incorporate carbon capture, you get your blue ammonia, or you can use renewable energy, and then you go through electrolysis, you get your green ammonia. This is what we did from 1972 to 2015. So we may talk about it as a new thing, but we have done it for 43 years. Next slide, please. So if you are making gray ammonia, this is the process flow where you've got your natural gas, take it through a steam reformer, then you get your hydrogen, air separation, nitrogen into the ammonia plant. Press, please. Again. And then you get your ammonia into storage, and then again, the rest of the process is the same. What is different is the process at the front end. Next slide, please. So when we resuscitate the green ammonia process flow, this is how it looks like. You've got electrolysis there. We are looking into newer models which are there. I know several suppliers are looking into this and they can supply this. And then we've got an air separation plant which is already there. We've got an ammonia plant which is already there. And then we produce our local ammonia 100% locally into storage. And then again, the rest of the process is what we already spoken about. Next slide, please. So to realize what we are thinking of doing, this is the projected pathway. We need a renewable source of energy. And then technology readiness, I've already alluded to various suppliers, technology suppliers who have indicated that they already have the electrolyzers that are suitable for this. Suitable infrastructure, government support in terms of an enabling environment to be able to implement the project. And then you have got offtake agreements if you want to sell the ammonia, if you are making excess. But for our purposes, we will need 115,000 tons per annum of ammonia for our own consumption. Next slide, please. So at Sable right now, as we sit, top left picture shows the ammonia synthesis plant, which is a HABA process. And then on the top left, top right is our air separation unit. Bottom left, that's a picture of an electrolyzer. We had 14 pairs installed. It was the largest electrolysis plant in the world. And the second best was actually half the size, and we understand it's in Peru. Bottom right, that's the electrolysis shed where we used to have the electrolyzers. The electrolyzers have all been sold out. They are no longer there, but the loop and the ASU are still there. Next slide, please. What we need to be able to recommission the green ammonia process is a solar energy, a PV plant, and we are actively looking into putting up one here at Sable. In the country, the Sable site is the second highest in terms of solar irradiation in the country. So we want to take advantage of that, and then we'll couple with the energy from Kariba, and then we are good to produce green ammonia once again. Next slide, please. So this is what Sable is looking at. We are looking at having the solar and then also combining with hydropower. And then we already have the ASU and the loop. And then what we also need to do is to find a technology supplier to supply the electrolyzers, and we are good to go. Right now, we are at a pre-feasibility study stage. And once we complete that, we hope that it will come out good, and then we'll be able to go right through to implementation of the project. That will be the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your listening.
Thank you so much, Alan. And it was very interesting to see that you indeed had one of the largest electrolysis-based ammonia plants in the world. And yeah, it's really great to see that the ammonia plant and the ASU are still there. And hopefully in the future we see some electrolyzers again. So to open the floor, and this is a question to all of you, and I will probably start with Ralph specifically for Kenya. So in your mind, what is mainly required to realize such renewable ammonia projects for your specific location? Is it public perception? Is it education / training of workers, or is it like really a monetary issue where you need investments or long-term, short-term offtake? So what is key to develop this?
I think what we see in the market, there's a lot of interest in these kind of projects, also from equity investors, but also from lenders, multilateral agencies that are quite keen on investing in green projects in Africa. I think what would help is if there are two types of projects. One, you can develop a power to ammonia project that is really oriented at export, and that means that you can valorize the green aspect of the project by exporting the product to Europe or to Japan, to those regions where parties are willing to pay a premium for the ammonia. If you go downstream to fertilizer, which makes a lot of sense for the development of the country, for creating a local industry, to keep the energy, let's say, within the country, there will be no farmer that is going to pay a premium for green fertilizer. For Sub-Saharan Africa, this is a project about food security, about availability of fertilizer. As Marcel mentioned, we see that the application rate of fertilizer are still lower than in other regions. So you would like to increase the application rates and help farmers to build their business and to increase their yields. So what would help is a mechanism to valorize the green aspect of the project to other countries, for instance, with an green ammonia certificate that would be tradable to other regions. I think that's really important. Then at the second stage, we think that education and training of local operators will be needed, because the experience of fertilizer production on the Sub-Saharan African continent is limited to a few regions. In Kenya, for instance, there is no experience, so a good training of operators will be absolutely required.
Thank you so much. So Alan, in your case, so you already have a lot of people with operational experience, 480 workers at the place. So what is key to develop a renewable ammonia project again in your location in Zimbabwe?
Right. So what has happened is we have looked around for development partners to partner us in developing the solar, because we realized that we need a solar park, because Kariba alone cannot supply all the electrolysis that the power that we need. So it needs to be coupled with other forms of renewable energy, and the cost of actually putting up such plants has been the bottleneck. But we are actively looking into that.
Thank you so much. So Marcel, from your location in more towards the west of Africa in Ghana, are there any specific obstacles or challenges over there? You're muted, Marcel.
Yes. So So I want to touch briefly upon all of Africa, and then what I say will also count for West Africa. Listening to my two co-panelists, they said something that I want to repeat, because it's a very important point. Alan, in his presentation, said when they could get renewable energy for 1 cent per kilowatt hour, he had a viable business. The moment it jumped to 9 cents, he didn't have a business anymore. Ralph said that no farmer is prepared to pay more money for green ammonia or green fertilizer than he would be for a gray fertilizer. That's very important. So what do we need in Africa in general? And the same goes for West Africa. First of all, renewable electricity at a low cost. And there where Alan talks about 1 cent, we could even do with 3 to 3.5 cents, which is $30 per megawatt hour. That's one. Low cost renewable energy. Cost of capital. Cost of capital right now, the cost of borrowing for Africa is higher than it is for Europe. That has to be addressed. And then thirdly, a local market with local demand, close proximity. And I think that's already there. If you look at East Africa, you got large farms in Ethiopia, Tanzania. If you look in Ghana, West Africa, Ghana has farms, Burkina Faso has farms, Cote d'Ivoire has farms. So the market is there. But if you cannot compete, we will not sell.
I think you're totally right there, Marcel. And also the point that Ralph already mentioned regarding the premium on fertilizers. Probably that's true in Africa, but more broadly, it's even true that an individual farmer is not so likely to pay a premium for its fertilizer unless there is downstream a value-added product being produced or it's mandated. So as a follow-up question also to Alan, so basically what Ralph mentioned, would it be a feasible pathway for you to kind of have a cake and eat it too, like with the producing renewable ammonia and then sell the certification that you get, sell that to, for instance, a European import or to an Asian import location? Would that be helping in the business case, for instance, for Zimbabwe?
I think Zimbabwe as an economy is agro-based as well as mining, but most of us are somehow involved with farming. So, and we need a lot of fertilizer, up to about 300,000 tons of fertilizer per annum. And being the only manufacturer of fertilizer, we would want to use all our fertilizers locally as trade stock as well as for compounds. So in the first instance, that should be our priority, to make sure that we make enough fertilizers for local use. So I would say, if we're going to use the assets that we have currently, the focus will then be to make for local production or local use.
Yeah, so indeed, I think you're totally right, producing it for local production. So I was more wondering on a more global certification scheme, like if you produce any renewable ammonia in Zimbabwe, would it make sense to sell these certificates in a book and claim system actually to other locations? So you have a money stream coming in per ton of ammonia. So is that something that can aid?
Yes, certainly. Thank you.
Very good. So Ralph, can you maybe also elaborate a bit on how a certification scheme kind of could help balance the books and make this a feasible operation? Like how much, maybe not name the exact numbers, but what kind of incentives would you need to make this happen?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at it, what would be needed in terms of a price of CO2, then we think that a price of CO2 as is being paid on the European under the European ETS system at the moment would be more than sufficient to allow for such projects to be feasible. And I fully agree with Alain that you want to keep the ammonia and the fertilizer in the country to the extent it's needed there. So it should be book and claim, it should be a paper that you would sell and that you would use to finance to increase the business case. But if we talk about prices in terms of CO2, it would be a very attractive scheme compared to other CO2 mitigation strategies.
Thank you so much. So that's already very encouraging, especially if we look at the shipping sector. It will be gradually integrated into the ETS system until 2026. So that's a very good sign. And that will probably help these projects to go along. And now I actually have a question from Marcel, also more on the organizational level. So, for instance, the Ammonia Energy Association, which I represent, and the African Hydrogen Partnership, we work quite hard to tell the story about ammonia and about hydrogen in a specific location. So what should actually be the role of our organization with regard to realizing renewable ammonia or hydrogen projects? Should it be more on the advocacy side, or should it also be focused on the education / information providing side? So what is kind of what should be our role in this kind of projects, according to you?
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Actually, all of the above. What we notice is when we talk about green hydrogen, green ammonia, it's new to a lot of people. So education and promotion is definitely a part of it, not only to African countries, but also to the DFIs and to the financial institutes in Europe. Unlike Europe, Africa cannot run green initiatives on subsidies. There are not so many subsidies available. So whatever we have, it has to be a valid business case, which again, as I said before, need to drive down the cost of borrowing. So AHP will talk to DFIs, will talk to financial institutes and explain to them how they can have a successful project in Africa, how they can reduce their risks in Africa, how actually they will increase their risk if they invest in old technology. AHP can talk to the governments for supporting policies, and it can bring people together, and that's what AHP has been doing over the past weeks. The green corridor in the eastern part of the continent is a very good example where multiple countries now work together. If you have multiple countries working together, you will also reduce the risk and reduce the cost. when it comes to West Africa, because you asked me before about West Africa, the good things that East Africa has when it comes to wind and sun, we have a little bit less of that in West Africa. We have less wind and less sun. That makes it right now a bit challenging to get to a price point of renewable energy that we need to be profitable. However, we can work together with some of the other countries like Namibia, like Mauritania, where it's a short distance to ship green hydrogen or green ammonia for there. So also there, AHP plays a role to connect opportunities, connect companies, connect governments.
And thank you so much, Marcel. So Alan, can you also follow up? What would you actually want to see from an African hydrogen partnership or from an ammonia energy association?
So what we are looking for is assistance in selling this concept. A lot of people are taking it as a new thing, especially in Europe. But like I said, we have 43 years of running this thing. We know it works. And up to about 3.5 cents, it was working. The moment it went to 5.6 cents, that's when we lost the business case. So if this can be promoted so that we speed up the process of deploying the technology, even in these parts of the world. So there are companies which are buying our old cell plates, and then they are refurbishing them, but they will be deployed in Europe. But we would want similar technology to be deployed here in Africa. So as we sit right now, we see ourselves being at the tail end of whatever new developments are happening. And yet we are saying we have a lot of IP in terms of running these things, especially once the technology is there. We have done it. So there is the promotion and also to have equitable deployment of the technology because the wind is here, the sun is here, and we can couple it with our hydropower from Kariba. There is also the promotion of lenders so that they can lower the lending rates because we don't have the benefit of development of funding that other people in Europe are benefiting from. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. So what I totally sense here is that there's kind of a knowledge exchange indeed that is very interesting, where on one hand you have the operational experience, and on the other hand there are new developments also with solar and wind coupled to electrolysis. And then I also sense the kind of the cost of capital that's really an issue that requires solving. So do you expect that there will be maybe more private investing also in your area of the world versus what we see in Europe, or how do you expect these dynamics to evolve? So
we have been following various technology suppliers. There was a question earlier on from an anonymous speaker or attendee who was asking what are the factors that affect the price of green ammonia. So it will be the tariff. You've got to get the tariff right. Then the next thing is the capex of actually deploying the equipment. If your capex is high, if the tariff is high, then you are not in business. Now, what we are looking at is seeing these technology developers bringing down the capex from 100 million per 100 megawatts plant. Right now, we are seeing developments where it's now around 70, and there are projections that we are going to be going to a region of 45 to 50 million for a 100 megawatt electrolysis plant. That would be super. That then brings in the cost of green ammonia within the levels that we can now produce affordable green fertilizers in a sustainable way for our population.
Thank you so much, Alan. I will now ask a question to Ralph. So with regards to this capex, this cost of capex, that is apparently an issue in various locations in Sub-Saharan Africa. Would it be an idea to have a model where you have a developer who kind of sells the ammonia per ton of ammonia as a kind of a purchase agreement on the longer term versus having to put in the investment up front as a local entity?
I think in the end, both parties, would like to have a return. I don't see there is a lack of interest from equity sponsors to join in the projects that we are developing in the region. So the financing is there. For every project, it's really important to look at the exact configuration, where the electricity coming from, but also what is the right sizing. So we see some countries where you can go for a smaller configuration because the country is more landlocked, you have high transportation costs, and then you can have it's okay to have less economies of scale. And in other projects, it's more important to have bigger economies of scale. And then you will need to look at the combination of local use of the fertilizer and export maybe of ammonia to foreign markets. It really depends a lot on the specific country, but if you can put the knots together, then I believe that financing will be available. It also differs, I have to say, a little bit per country and what is the financing ability of a specific country.
Thank you so much for that, and also the questions I previously asked to Marcel and Alan as well. So as a project developer, what do you seek from a African hydrogen partnership or an ammonia energy association? Like, what kind of information or advocacy do you expect?
Yeah, no, I think it's also creating awareness. That's really important. We see that, especially on a political level, on the local authorities, national authorities, there's not so much understanding of green hydrogen, of the technology, how proven it is. So there, I think the different associations could really help to create awareness, to increase the level of know-how in the country on the production of green hydrogen, and also the opportunities, because people have looked for decades at fossil resources, being oil, gas, and that can bring wealth to the country. I think in the coming decades, what we will see is that the sun, that wind or geothermal or hydro, those are the resources of the future to build a sustainable industry upon, that you can use for ammonia production, but also for hydrogen for transport, or maybe to fuel a steel industry. So the way that you're looking at the resources that you have as a country, they will change, and they will be fundamentally different than from the past. And that's, I think, where the Ammonia Energy Association or the Hydrogen Partnership could really play a big role.
Thank you so much. And indeed, that also ties into what we discussed last time when discussing mainly Mauritania, where we were talking about different developments with regards to green hydrogen, green electricity, and how it could also locally tie into, for instance, the steel industry, or to the local population, so that they have additional low-cost electricity as well as clean water, for instance. And that also ties into a bit a general question. Would it be interesting to have a combination of local production for local use and also partially exporting products? So first, Ralph, is this useful or is this a predatory thing?
I think that we see a lot of countries that are looking at the opportunity to produce ammonia for export. And if the opportunity is there, it's great. And I think there are different continents that need green ammonia and that need to import it because they will not be able to produce all of it themselves. So there for sure is an opportunity for different countries. However, I feel that if you create an export-oriented plant, you also have to look at the country itself and see how could the production of ammonia benefit the country, and wouldn't it be worthwhile to use part of the hydrogen or part of the ammonia that you produce for downstream productions like fertilizer. So I think that you should want to do that. I have to say, though, that the dynamics of developing an export-oriented plant towards adding local fertilizer plants are, from a project development perspective, quite different. You have totally different offtake agreements where for export you can think about long-term offtake agreements. The local market is often much more on the spot market. Farmers, they buy the fertilizer every year. They don't sign 10-year offtake agreements. And so the dynamics are different. It requires a different project development approach, also much more a value chain approach that we use to involve the different parties over the value chain to mitigate the risk. But I think you cannot go to a country and just take what you need. You have to look at what can you do for the country yourself as well.
And I think you're totally right. And maybe Alan, you already briefly touched upon this as well. So what's your opinion regarding local use versus export or combination? Is this useful or is this predatory?
So I think our approach is we've got to walk before we run. So we are looking at resuscitating the green ammonia facility for own use. If we are going to use the assets that are already there, the ammonia synthesis plant and the air separation unit, we will barely make about 117,000 tons per annum of ammonia. And our plant requires 115,000 tons per annum. So I think our focus right now is really to make for own consumption in a sustainable manner. If we were to start from scratch and build bigger plants, both the ammonia plant, and all associated plants, then maybe we could design it in a manner that there is excess, and then that we can talk about exports. But as we sit right now, our focus is to resuscitate as was, and then we make for own consumption locally.
I think you're totally right. That first you need to make it happen before you can actually export. That's totally right. Marcel, maybe from a bit broader perspective, what you see within the Green and the African Hydrogen Partnership, do you mainly see local production sites, or do you see mainly export sites, or are these actually interlinked? So what do you see?
Okay, so I think it depends a bit on country per country. So of course, having low-cost fertilizers available in country will benefit the agricultural sector. Having export will benefit your currency. It will strengthen your local currency. So my view is that initially we should focus on developing the economies by providing low-cost ammonia and also low-cost hydrogen. Whatever is surplus, I agree with Alan, that you can then use for export. But the primarily focus, in my view, should be on the local market. As I stated earlier, right now, per hectare, the agricultural sector in Africa fertilizes 1/5 of the global average. If we can put more fertilizers, we have better yield, and it will solve a lot of food related problems. So my view is, let's focus on local. Whatever's left, that can benefit the export and your currency.
Thank you so much for that. I think you're totally right. So let's now have a bit of a look forward. Let's say we are now 5 to 10 years from now, and then Ralph, what has been achieved for met development in Africa, but maybe also in other locations in the most ideal scenario?
Well, in Sub-Saharan, we're working on a number of projects, not only the one in Kenya, but also in other regions. So I think by that time, by 2030, we hope to have realized 3 to 5 local power to fertilizer production facilities. And then we hope that by that time, sustainable nitrogen fertilizer production will become the dominant factor for new fertilizer production sites worldwide. And then I think the African continent could take a leapfrog in going straight away, set aside the existing fossil-based fertilizer plant, but to build all the new ones on the green nitrogen basis.
And indeed, I think also, especially in Africa, there is a great opportunity to indeed directly move towards renewable fertilizers rather than first transitioning to mainly fossil-based fertilizers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Especially because right now there's probably about 12 million ton equivalent ammonia production in Africa, where even most of that is in Northern Africa and not so much in Sub-Saharan Africa. So it is really.
Yeah, and I think if I may add, Kevin, that what Marcel is saying. So if you look at the fertilizer application, then in many of the African countries, it's still below the Abuja targets, so it should be increased. If you can have a local fertilizer production facility that can provide affordable fertilizer with security of supply throughout the year, and that way you can increase the application rates in the country, and you would translate that back into increased crop yields in terms of maize or wheat or whatever, and then see the impact on the GDP of a country, because many of these countries, they have up to 20-25% of the GDP is based on agriculture, so that can really have a huge impact on the national GDP if you can provide a stable and affordable fertilizer.
Thank you so much for that. So Alan, in 5 to 10 years, what would be the best case scenario for the facility in Zimbabwe?
So food security is a top priority for Zimbabwe and for the region, especially in light of the effects of climate change. So we just need to have our own local production facility of our fertilizers so that we can ensure food security. The challenge that arises is that, yes, we have these aspirations to do green ammonia and green fertilizers in a sustainable manner. But Zimbabwe, just like the region, is also well endowed with coal resources. We are also talking about 20 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, which is being explored. And the thing that we need to ensure that doesn't quite happen is a situation whereby we now have a gray fertilizer plant locally. And this one, the green ammonia is not moving. So what we need to do is the associations, the technology suppliers, the government, the funders, the providers of CAPEX, so that if we can work together, we see this as something that we can easily do in less than 5 years. We can be up and running on the green ammonia fertilizer facility for Sable.
Thank you so much. Indeed, if like the project will be developed today and we order solar panels and electrolyzers, it should be able to be done realized in a few years indeed. Marcel, more on the higher level of all the projects being developed and that you see in the African Hydrogen Partnership. So in 5 to 10 years, when has this been a success for you?
Okay, let me be selfish now and talk about West Africa, where I'm located. For West Africa, 5 to 10 years, I would be extremely pleased if we can have a hydrogen or ammonia solution in country, a green one, of course, at a competitive price. So we can price diesel out of the market. Now, whether we do that through our own development in country, or whether we do that with collaboration of countries like Namibia and Mauritania. So for West Africa, I really hope that in that period of time, we would have a solution that can revolutionize the farming industry, that can revolutionize the transport industry, off-grid solutions. But our focus should be now how to get it available, because it's not so much a chicken on an egg situation. It is a matter of competitiveness. Once you have a competitive solution, you can develop the market.
Thank you so much. And I think you're totally right. We see the first renewable hydrogen plants, renewable ammonia plants based on solar and wind being developed and scaled up over the years. And probably by 2026, around that time, we see world-scale renewable ammonia plants. So this is being developed. And so I'm also really looking forward how this will develop. And hopefully we see some of these plants develop in an early stage in Sub-Saharan Africa as well. We are about an hour into our discussion, so I would like to thank all of you for the very fruitful discussion we had and also for all the insights you gave us at the beginning of this webinar. So thank you so much for that. And with that, thank you to Marcel, Ralph and Alan. And in next week, Thursday, actually, we will move on with our third part of the series on African ammonia projects. And the link to that is in the chat. So feel free to join us for the discussion as well. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.